And thank you very much for joining us here on PM Express. Today is a big day indeed for the John Dramani Mahama administration. It is the administration's first budget day, and they put out their economic policy. And this is on the back of last year's campaign for elections. They won it, but they won it with a blueprint, their manifesto. And they told us a few things that they wanted to do if they win. Based on that social contract, you voted for them. This is a first opportunity to see if they really have what it takes to implement all the promises that they make to us. And so the finance minister, Dr. Ato Forson, went to Parliament today and put before the House and our representatives the economic policy. And we're beginning to learn a few things. One thing that jumps out is that the government is desperate, in a hurry, to fulfill those key promises. And a lot of the big ticket items, they have found a way to fund it. And they are not only funding it, but they're also cutting nuisance taxes. And that many are beginning to ask the question, how is a government able to cut taxes, but also spend to make your life better and put more money in your pocket, but at the same time, plug the gaps that will emerge when they cut the taxes? Somehow, Dr. Ato Forson put before Parliament today a master plan that cuts taxes, puts more social programs at play that benefits you, but also somehow he showed us, illustrated it, by cutting elsewhere, readjusting funds that I didn't even know existed, doing a study, in one case over 8 years, looking at how much we're spending from that account and using part of that to fix part of the holes that will be left. If you check Twitter, there's a conversation happening there, and I saw it tonight. My colleagues drew my attention to it. And people are now calling this atonomics. Whatever that is, we'll get to find out tonight. The man himself is here with me. He is the finance minister, Dr. Ato Forson. Thank you very much, Doc.
Thank you.
And I'm grateful that you could join me.
Thanks for having me.
And what you didn't know is that the man, before he became finance minister, was an expert, a think tank person. So don't be surprised that we are standing in front of a touch screen. Because what you heard in Parliament is great, but it's good to see it. It's good to see it. And then he can talk us through what he has done. And that's why we're going to do this. And I'm grateful that you accepted to do that.
Thank you.
So two segments tonight. We'll do breaking down the specifics, and then we'll sit down for a conversation where I can ask him a few more questions on your behalf, so we can get a bit more granular detail. Questions like, when can we see these beginning to reflect in your pocket? If they've taken away the taxes, when do you expect that when you send money to your mother, you're no longer going to pay that e-levy on it? That will be extra money, either in your mom's pocket or in your pocket. I want to get that detail for you. So stay with me for that second half of the show. We have 1 hour, 30 minutes for this, and so we can get a bit more time with the finance minister. And I want to go straight to it. And you start today by giving us a sense of how you came by this document, the content.
Exactly.
And you give us 3 different sources of ideas for you, if you want to walk us through that.
So first, we engaged the National Economic Dialogue, and it was, let me say, masterclass. We were privileged to have a chairman who is an industrial person, very experienced person, and he took us through a very important dialogue. The participation was apolitical. It was very nationalistic in nature, and the outcome was quite encouraging. To my surprise, the very concerns that I had were the very concerns that the vast majority of the breakout sessions came out with. So there was some convergence. Largely it has to do with fiscal discipline, the way and manner we have destroyed ourselves as a country. So I took that into consideration in preparing the budget. Aside that, I engaged traders in major trading centers.
And this was unprecedented, because I'm yet to see, since I became politically aware, a finance minister who then decides to go to the market. And he didn't just go to the market. A very upskilled man could have gone to Accra Mall, for example. But he went to Mokala of all places.
But you know what, Evans? The best economists in this country are largely market women.
Okay.
They've tested it, they've tried it, they are successful, the best economists that you can ever see.
What was the thinking behind it? And so that's what you're watching there. On your screen, that's the finance minister interacting with a market woman in a shop. and this is Mokola, for those of you who haven't seen it. I'm just curious to know what informed this strategy, going to the market and talking to people?
Largely, there was a series of conversation around government. And that conversation had to do with, are we addressing the needs of the people? And His Excellency the President said, engage further. So the first thing that came to mind was, if I'm going to engage, I have to engage practitioners. Not for only think tanks and high-level people, but I need to go down. And I decided to visit the Mokola market. To my surprise, something came out very strong. Almost every single person that I met, and most of them are women, they said, look, the problem of Ghana today has to do with exchange rate. And if you can stabilize the cedi for us, we'll also be able to hold prices. And I saw a situation that really touched me. A lady that I met in a shop, as soon as she saw me, she started smiling. And I said, how are you? She said, yes, I'm fine. And she went on, so I asked her, where is she coming from? She said, I'm coming from Tufupraso. And to my amazement, the lady said, I was in this shop 3 weeks ago. It's a warehouse. And I buy cooking utensils and resell in my hometown. And today I came back last week. I bought it for about 1,350. I think she said 1,350. And that 1,350, within 3 weeks, the price has changed from 1,350 to approximately 1,750.
I saw that.
So I was really shocked.
You actually exclaimed.
I said, wow, you don't mean it. Within 3 weeks. So I put her in back to the shop, and I asked the shop owner, what exactly is going on here? The shop owner said to me that because of the volatilities we see in the exchange rate, they also have to hedge. And in hedging, they increase their price forward, looking at probably what may happen in the next couple of days. So I assured him that based on the structures we are putting in place, prices of goods and services is not going to go up on the back of the exchange rate that much. I said, okay, if you can signal to us that that's what is going to happen, we also hold our prices. So for me, it was an eye-opener. And in fact, if I get opportunity, I'll go back to the market. And the kind of information I had in the market is economics made simple. It's more than economics. And
we'll see how that then translates into some of the policies that you put out there. Because I hear you emphasizing the point about the people and how there's a very clear distinction in what you're doing. What I see in the budget today, one tax item that you introduce is on the big players in the mining sector.
Exactly.
When it comes to the ordinary people, everything else is about scrapping taxes. Even the VAT reforms I saw today, you were actually thinking about households.
The focus is on households.
Households. I saw households.
VAT is a consumption tax.
Yeah.
And the incident falls on you, the consumer. Businesses will get input VAT and they will be able to offset. But as for household, the incidence is directly on you. And that is the main reason why we're of the view that where VAT is today, we need to reform it and reform it in such a way to give relief to the ordinary Ghanaian, the household. And we say this because if you look at Africa today, Ghana is the only country with effective VAT rate of about 21.9%.
So effectively,
most countries about effective 22%. Most countries have, I think the second highest is Morocco with about 20%. So clearly, there was a problem with the VAT. Not only that, the VAT rate itself has been distorted. You can see some cascading element. You can see the distortion where sales tax has been mixed with value-added tax, where there are some flat rate, there's a standard rate, and many other distortions. So we think this year we should spend some good time to engage properly and review the value-added tax.
We'll come interrogate those a bit. And there's another one is to the youth, and we saw that on X, where you engaged the young people. More than 60,000 people at some point watched you, and this was all before the budget, and all that fed into that. I've seen a few initiatives in there trying to address that bracket of people.
And the kind of knowledge and the participation that came from the youth was amazing. I heard something to my amazement, that a group of pharmacists, over 300 of them, were employed in June 2023. And from June 2023 to date, they've not been paid. I was surprised. I was very active, in the economy since many years ago. But I've never heard this. So when I heard it, I was really surprised at what is going on here. And so I commit to resolve.
Okay. So that's where you get it from in terms of the specifics. But then we look at the fiscal discipline. And I noticed that at the economic dialogue, Dr. Ismail Yamson kept emphasizing that point about
the crust of the matter.
Discipline. You put out a few things today, and we see it on your screens here where you say you want to enforce sanctions on the PFM Act. Sanctions could mean that you're going to be sanctioning some of your own colleagues.
But Evans,
in cabinet, you have the balls to do that?
Evans, first of all, let's call a spade a spade. The Public Financial Management Act has not been implemented as it should be. The Act is a gold star. In fact, it is one of the best you can get in the world. I don't think you can count first 20 countries with very strong, robust PFM regime better than that of Ghana. But the truth remains that Ghana has unable to implement the PFM Act. The previous administration virtually did not implement the PFM Act. We do not need new laws. All what we need to do is to implement the PFM Act. And to implement it successfully, you need to apply the sanctions. And the sanctions may not only be looking forward, it has to look at those who have infringed upon the PFM Act.
In the past?
In the past. So you have to look back and look forward so that, at the minimum, those in office today will also know that what has happened to the person who infringed upon the PFM Act may happen to you.
To be clear.
So the country will not go there.
This will apply to officers in the previous administration.
Of course, it's a PFM Act, and if the infractions were so severe to the extent that it has affected the economy of Ghana, and people are paying a huge price of it, then of course, the Attorney General must act on that. So
this is something that you are going to be looking into, or you have the Attorney General set up a team to probe and find out who has been violating this?
So first of all, we've begun a process to validate some claims at the Ministry of Finance. We inherited huge arrests and huge commitment. Arrests in excess of 67 billion Ghana cedis. 67 billion.
And I want to go there because we're talking about the state of the economy as you met it now, and this is what you presented
67 billion Ghana cedis.
So are you talking about?
Yes, that's it.
That's it.
So we inherited this 67.5 billion Ghana cedis, representing 5.2% of GDP. But it will surprise you to note that this 67.5 billion Ghana cedis, over 80% of this amount, the contract was awarded without commencement certificate.
So this is government contractors and suppliers.
Government contractors and suppliers. You see, and of this 67.5 billion cedis, we have 18 billion cedis plus sitting at the Controller and Accountant General, being payment that has been processed and waiting for payment, because the Minister of Finance then had signed and is sitting at the Controller and Accountant.
Why though? Why is it sitting there if it's...
Well, it's sitting at the Controller and Accountant General because there's no cash to pay. There's no cash to pay.
So whoever was signing...
today, so they just signed it, but there was no cash available.
They didn't know at the time they were signing that there was no cash?
Well, I will not be able to make that statement. But the truth is, they knew that they had exceeded their ceilings for the year, but they still process. And 18.2 billion Ghana cedis is sitting at the Controller and Accountant General today, as I speak with you. Then we have another 49.2 billion Ghana cedis, also sitting at various MDAs, being work done, waiting for payment to the Controller and Accountant General, and obviously to Bank of Ghana for payment. So the two put together will give you 67.5 billion Ghana cedis, being outstanding claims that the government of Ghana had to pay. The first question is, do we have the money to pay that now?
I guess it's a question that the finance minister is the only person who can answer. Do we have the money?
Well, I don't think we have enough 67.5 billion to pay now, because these contracts were awarded without budget, two without allotment, and we do not have the space to accommodate them. We should provision for them. But before you make provision and before you start paying, the first thing you need to do is to validate it. In the budget, I've made provision for some 13 billion cedis to start paying down.
While you validate?
Even before I pay, I need to ensure that this amount is legitimate. And to assess the legitimacy of the amount, we will need to bring on board the Auditor General. So I've reached out to the Auditor General. I've asked him to commission an audit and validate the amount and advice before we can start paying.
And ultimately, you say that the Attorney General may have to get involved in prosecuting
people. We need to, it is his decision to make that. I mean, it's.
But you pull the evidence before him if you find it.
The question is, we have to first of all identify the infractions. If we identify the infractions, we have to submit that to the Attorney General for advice. It is for the Attorney General to make that advice.
Let's break this down a bit more because, and again, this is talking about what you meant. These are huge numbers when it comes to some of the agencies.
It's not only the arrests. The problem we have is more than the arrests.
Okay.
We have, again, contracts that has been awarded and active. About 194 billion Ghana cedis. Contracts. 194 billion Ghana cedis. Contract that has been awarded across the economy. That the Ministry of Finance, one way or the other, if they are to perform, will have to pay. But you see, the contract is what flows into the IPCs. Because when the person works, then the state will have to make allocation to pay. But if you don't have money, why do you award those contracts? 194 billion, almost $200 billion as cedis. 200 billion cedis. And that is different from the 67.5 billion Ghana cedis.
So you're not sure yet if those contracts have been executed or have been executed?
Yes, from the first job that we did, the feedback we had is that some of them are at site working, and some have also, some of them are suppliers, so they have to supply and they are in the process to supply. And so I've said that I want to validate once again and to find out whether they have the authorization to commit government to that extent. And if they don't have authorization, we'll ask them to stop.
In the meantime, are you asking them to pause whilst you look?
Yes, we have already communicated that.
They should pause whilst you look?
Because we need to find out as to whether they have authorization to commit that quantum, 194 billion Ghana cedis, and as to whether the budget can accommodate 194 billion. For example, if they are able to produce IPCs worth 100 billion cedis, can the budget accommodate it? The answer is certainly no, not accommodate it.
And then you talk about, now you're giving us the numbers when it comes to ECG and others.
Yes.
Now we know from what you've said today in Parliament that ECG...
68 billion cedis being amount that they owe. They've awarded so much contract also. Some of the items, according to the minister responsible for energy and green transition, he has informed us that ECG has awarded contracts and they have actually got people to supply them things they would not need for the next 10 years. And some of the things that they would not need for the next 10 years, the expiry date will be the next 5 years. And the question is, can we continue like that as a country?
68 billion
68 billion cedis. But that is not all. They owe IPPs another 1.73 billion US dollars.
Because obviously ECG collects.
Yes, they collect, and they have to pay the IPPs. And if you collect and you use the money to award contract and spend the money ahead of your original obligation, then the question is, they are transferring this IPP's obligation to the state.
And you said today you're negotiating this.
Yes, we have to.
The previous government started something.
Yes, so
they made some savings there.
The rendition, I don't think they signed them or got it through Parliament. Parliament did not approve that. What we seek to do at the moment is to complete that process, and we believe we can make some strong savings. But we'll begin the negotiations.
Cocoa board, you mentioned cocoa board.
It's another elephant.
Huge one, 32 billion.
Yes.
Is what they owe.
32 billion Ghana cedis owned by Ghana Cocoa Board. And of this 32 billion, they owe cocoa roads alone about 20 billion Ghana cedis.
And then you're talking about the cocoa road, exactly what you're talking about. That's 5.7 billion.
This one is road fund.
Road fund, the road fund, yes. Road fund. Yes.
Road fund also owe contractors approximately 6 billion Ghana cedis.
And this is the thing that surprised me. BOG is asking for a bailout.
Yes.
53 billion
cedis.
For what? You say to deal with the negative equity.
Yes.
And this is on the back of the report that showed that there's 60 billion hole.
You remember in my previous life as the minority leader, I kept saying that Bank of Ghana had generated so much debt, so much, deficit. As a result, their balance sheet is not healthy, and that they have generated negative equity. Apparently, the previous administration and the Bank of Ghana had signed an MOU for the government of Ghana, or the taxpayer, to recapitalize the central bank with 53 billion Ghana cedis.
Do you have the money?
I've asked the Bank of Ghana to look within and cut expenditure, because the taxpayer cannot afford 53 billion. And I've communicated that to the government.
But they already have an agreement with government.
But they can look within. They can look within. First of all, they have to look within. You know, you've seen their new head office, very big building. They have a choice to sell and lease back if they want to. They have to look within and cut expenditure and reduce. Evans, the taxpayer cannot afford 53 billion Ghana cedis. Giving 53 billion Ghana cedis to the central bank will simply mean that we will have to deny the taxpayer some public good, like roads, like schools, and like hospitals. Is that what we want? Can we afford it at this stage? The question is no. The answer is no. We cannot be able to afford that. And so the central bank must look within. They have hotels like Guest House and others. Why are they in Guest House? Can they sell some of them and use the money to recapitalize? The taxpayer cannot be used as a punching bag. So I've said to them they should look within. Luckily for me, the governor is on board. And I expect the governor to look within and cut expenditure to reflect the needs of the bank.
If they come to you with, their share of the bargain, right, would you meet them halfway? Or you want them to
the central bank
find all 53 billion?
If the central bank is able to come to me with a reasonable offer, we can have a conversation.
Okay.
But it must start from them. And I have also said that they may also have to consider plowing back their profit over the next 10 years to recapitalize it. That can also be done. It depends.
But what is the implication if they don't do this quickly? Can they survive?
It is not a problem. The bank can survive. See, first of all, what they need to do is to, as soon as possible, generate enough cash to be able to run the affairs of the bank, which I believe they are doing that. All over the world, you've seen some central banks that have survived with negative equity. So
yeah.
It's not out of order. They can be.
They can do that. And of course, there are many stalled projects as a result of everything you've talked about. A few of them, you told us, number of projects, 55. 5.63 billion commitment on projects.
All right.
You talk about 2.67 billion less disbursement, and on disbursed, you're talking about 2.95 billion. And this includes pending IPCs with lenders of significant amounts of money.
All right. Evans, you recall that as part of the debt restructuring, the previous government engaged all bilateral creditors and said that we can't pay our debt any longer. And as a result, disbursement stalled. And we have 55 projects dotted across the country. You've seen the one on your way to Tema through the Central University.
The Tema Flower Road?
See the one from Tema also going all the way to Atimpoku. You've seen the Teshinungwa, the one that the Chinese company is doing. If you go to Takrady, you see the Takrady Market Circle. You see the Fionkwanta Hospital. You see if you go to Kumasi, you see the Komfanochi Hospital. You see Kumasi Outer, Kumasi Inner City roads. And you can also remember this famous this market, KJT market. And many others. There are 55 in number. And it's scattered across the country. As we speak, we have undisbursed amount, approximately 3 billion Ghana cedis, US dollars, 3 billion US dollars. And we also have 300,000 US dollars being IPCs that are outstanding. Aside that, because of the demobilization costs and remobilization delayed payment, we anticipate that an average of 1.1 billion US dollars will accrue to the state as a result of demobilization costs and cost overruns. So that is a big situation. But you see, the problem is not even the project. The problem is the fact that if care is not taken, this project may not be completed anytime soon. I think what I've said is even it's an understatement. If you look at the next graph, you will notice that the IMF has access. The IMF has access to, or IMF has placed the limit of $250 million on all disbursement. After the disbursement resumes, when we've signed the MOU, we are now going to initiate the individual bilateral agreement. After that, you can only draw down $250 million. This means that all the projects you see around the country that are stored, you will need 12 good years to be able to complete it. 12 years. But I'm saying that that will not be a better way to manage public funds.
So what are you going to do about it?
So what we're going to do in the coming days, we'll put on the Ghana hat and prioritize this project. We'll pick first 5 or first 8 and ensure that the next 4 years we'll be able to finish it. Otherwise, if we spread ourselves so thin, the next 4 years we have nothing to show. And some of the projects are 0%, some 10%, some 90%. But why don't you concentrate and finish those at 90%, 80%, 70%, and allow or agree to not to continue the ones that are about 10% or 5%. So these are some of the things that we can consider.
And I want to quickly, as we wrap up, before we sit down for a bigger conversation on some of the key issues, some of the big ticket items. And I know many of you are getting home right now and wondering, did they keep their promise to scrap the taxes? Because that directly impacts your pocket. Yes, they did. And a whole host of them, 5 of them. So we have 10% withholding tax on winnings. That's the famous betting tax is gone. You have the electronic tax e-levy.
All right.
Is gone. You have the emissions levy is gone. You have the VAT on motor vehicle insurance policy is gone as well. And then you have 1.5 withholding tax on winnings of unprocessed gold by small-scale miners, also gone. All of this. And the key question we've been asking you since you put this out in the manifesto was, how are you going to make up for the revenue shortfall? You told us something today. Many economists have said, I'm just quoting Professor Bockman, who I spoke to on News 9 on my radio program, says it is unprecedented. And he rarely comments any gap, but he did commend you. How did you manage to plug this gap?
Okay, Evans, I think going into the ministry, I recall that in 2016, on behalf of my former boss, the Honorable Seth, we sent a bill to Parliament called the Revenue Administration Act. And as part of that act, we had proposed to Parliament to impose 6% of all revenue to be set aside for the purposes of tax refund. 6%. And then we left office in 2016. And so 2017 to date, the 6% had accumulated in total about 26 billion cedis. This 26 billion, I asked the JRA and the Ministry of Finance to give me a breakdown of how this taxes and tax refund account has been used. To my surprise, only, and I mean only 43% of the resources that accumulated into that account was used for the purposes that it was supposed to be used for.
And the purpose then was
to refund taxes.
Okay. So if you've paid your tax and it's established to an audit, you will refund.
Exactly. Like, you know, because of the nature and structure of the VAT, for example, there are times that you overpay and then the tax authority will have to make sure that they refund you to encourage you to make also pay your taxes. Evans, 43% was used largely for tax refund. So I said, are you sure? Can you give me an analysis as to whether they have accumulated some arrears and they are not paying? To my surprise, once again, there was no arrears. And so largely less than 50% of the tax refund amount has been used for the purposes of tax refund. Then I came out to ask them a question. Can you tabulate for me, year in, year out, in the last 8 years, how they have applied the 57%? To my surprise, once again, the money was largely misapplied and used for things that were not supposed to be used. You understand? And I said, this practice cannot continue. And so we are going to put a stop. And to put a stop, we said, okay, to start with, we'll take 2% of the 6% and bring it down to 4%. That 2% this year alone is giving me 3.8 billion cedis. And so 3.8 billion cedis, I looked at what are the taxes that we can scrap. E-levy, I will lose 1.9 billion. So I'll take 1.9 billion from the 3.8. Then I said, what about betting tax? From the implementation so far, if I remove it, I will lose 180 million. So the two put together is about 2.1 billion. So 2.1 minus 3.8, I still have 1.7 billion cedis left. And that 1.7 billion cedis, I decided to give it to society, the ordinary Ghanaian. Give it to society, the ordinary Ghanaian. And who are they? Assemblymen were given 100 million cedis. We gave some money, 499.5 million, to buy sanitary pads for schoolgirls. We gave some money back also to capitation grant, increase it by 73%. We gave some money to buy textbooks. We increased school feeding program. And that 1.7 billion is enough to take care of basic social needs of the ordinary Ghanaian. And so that was something simple that we could do. And I think the way and manner that account had been misused, we need to look into it. We definitely have to look into it because this is against the PFM Act and it's against the Enabling Act, the Revenue Administration Act itself. And the way and manner that account has been abused and raped over the last 8 years is very regrettable.
And by the way, I'm going to be interrogating that a bit more because there are a few more questions there that needs to be unpacked. We're going to take a break. When I return, we'll take a seat. Then I get to ask him the hard questions on your behalf. Now you understand what he's done. He's now told us also how they got the money to give out a bit more to some of the key policies they promised to do. 100 million to the women banking, something that it's also something you put money into. Paying assemblymen is something that you promised that you're also going to commit to. But he's now telling us how they found the money. But let's interrogate it a bit more when we sit for a conversation. You want to stay with us. Dr. Ato Forson, the finance minister, is my guest here on PM Express. We're going to be breaking down this a bit more with some of your questions that have come in, a few of my own also. Let's understand this a bit more, but let's get him also to answer some of the key questions you have, including what the former government has been saying now on the back of the budget, that some of the tax handles that they've abolished, they actually never implemented. And so the point is, how can you abolish something that was never implemented? We will deal with that when we return from this break.